Good morning, everybody. It is 9:05, so I'll officially open round 849 of the Planning Regulation Committee. We welcome all of our committee members and visitors here today. Welcome back EGM Swain from her overseas tours and all the gaggle of officers today. Look at that beautiful bunch of people in there. Good morning to our chamber support staff as always. Nothing happens without you here, so thank you. And we would acknowledge members of the public in the gallery today and those watching online. We'll commence with attendance and apologies, of which I have received nil and have no leave of absence. Confirmation of the minutes. Someone happy to move the minutes of round 848? Moved Councillor Doran, seconded Councillor O'Neill. All those in favour? Minutes are carried unanimous. Conflict of interest declarations. I'm aware of two, which we'll deal with right now. So I'll go to you, Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two on item 6.6. They are both relating to consultants to the project. I'll do the first one, which is UPS, who in 2014 and 2015 provided $1,850 per year to my election campaign for attendance at a function. The donations are outside the relevant term, and I have not discussed the application with the applicant or consultants, and I seek to participate in the decision.
Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Gates before I seek a procedural motion? In that case, Councillor Fowler, do you have a proposed procedural motion?
Thank you, Chair. Just like to move that Councillor Gates may participate in the decision, despite the councillor's conflict of interest, because it is outside of the relevant term and the interest is minor and of a remote nature, such that a reasonable person would trust that a final decision will be made in the public interest.
I have a proposed procedural motion, seconded by Councillor Young. Any questions before I take the vote? All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Young, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Martin, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill.
Councillor Gates did not vote.
She did not.
This thing is fun already, am I? What are you declaring?
Oh, just two conflicts from ages ago.
Yeah. So we're just going to add in that one point about outside the relevant term to make sure it reflects what your motion was.
No, it's not the current term.
Relevant term.
I mean, it's outside the current term as well. It's outside several.
Councillor Fowler, can I just check quickly you're happy with that wording?
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
In that case, we'd ask our support staff to copy that because I feel like we're about to use it again. Councillor Gates, your second conflict of interest?
Thank you. The second one is for the same, the Water and Sewer Civil Consultant Arcadis. An employee of Arcadis donated $1,950 in 2014 and Arcadis $1,850 in 2015. But again, the donations were outside the relevant term, and I have not discussed the matter with the applicant or consultants and seek to participate in the decision.
Do I have a procedural motion? Go for two. Councillor Fowler, procedural motion.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to move the same statement that we had before for the procedural motion.
Do I have a seconder to Councillor Fowler's motion? Councillor Doran. We have a live motion. We'll take the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Young, Fowler, Patterson, Martin, Doran and O'Neill. Please record Councillor Gates did not vote. Councillors, is there any other conflict of interest declarations to be raised at this time? Very good. In that case, we will move along to the starred items. Items that we wish to unstar, councillors. Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. 5.1.
Councillor Patterson.
6.4. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
6.6. Thanks, Chair.
That's all right. 6.6 is unstar because of the conflict already. Councillor Gates. 6.7, Councillor O'Neill. Okay. Do I dare ask if there's anything we can add a star to?
Did 6.5 come off, Chair?
It hasn't yet.
Yes, can we answer that?
I was waiting for it. In that case, that would appear that, so can I just check there's no interest in starring 6.1 to 6.2? I tried. Okay, so that leaves us with 6.9 as the only starred item. So we'll deal with the starred items now. Do I have a mover for that one remaining item? Councillor Gates, a seconder. And Councillor Doran, all those in favour. Carried unanimous. So that's 6.9 dealt with, strong start. And sorry, 6.3. No, Councillor Doran unstarred, 5.1. Yep. So, councillors, before we get into those items, we have a fairly full agenda today. While I believe we can definitely get through it, that's probably going to have to be through me facilitating the meeting in a fairly firm manner, I think. So we'll try and move through these items and get through them. But yes, if I push back a little bit and say, let's get to the question and let's move on in the hope of getting through this rather hefty agenda before 1 o'clock today. No GBIs. I haven't received any GBIs and won't be accepting any late GBIs. Okay. Let's lock and load. Councillor Doran, your questions on 5.1.
Thank you, Chair. Just that we go straight from 850 to 852. I was just wondering why 851 wasn't listed in the forward planning schedule.
Madam EGM.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that might be a thank you. That might be a typo. It's hard to tell, but 850 is our last meeting for the year, which is our next one. So unless there's been a change to the numbering for next year, but I'll just double check that. But I'm assuming that that will be 851, where 852 is.
Any other questions on the forward schedule? No. Yep. No other questions? Councillor Doran, you happy to move that? Seconder? Councillor Gates, all those in favour? Carried unanimous. 6.1. Officers who would like to join us. Councillors, are we happy to go straight to questions on the item? That's your prerogative. So Councillor Doran's interested in the presentation. Is the rest of the committee wanting the presentation or straight to questions? It's a quick presentation. Just a brief presentation to have. Councillor Doran will take the full presentation at another time.
Okay, good morning, councillors. This morning I'd like to give you a very brief overview of the amendments being proposed to the City's Local Law 2 and Subordinate Local Law 2 amendments in relation to regulated parking. Oops. Had a mishap. Okay, so today we are asking councillors to resolve to commence the making of amending instruments to these local laws. As you can see, should you resolve to propose to make the amending instruments today, we will commence both the state and public consultation steps and then report back to council with the outcomes of that consultation with appropriate recommendations. So those recommendations might be adopting the laws as proposed with amendments or even repeating steps. There are 6 attachments to the report. The first 2 attachments, 1 and 2, are the amending instruments. These are legal instructions on how the text of the current laws should be amended to include our proposed amendments. Attachments 3 and 4 are clean copies of the full local law and subordinate local law if all proposed changes go through, so consolidated with those amendments. And attachments 5 and 6 are marked up versions of the full local law and subordinate local law to clearly show what has changed. So essentially attachments 3 and 6 are for the benefit of councillors and the community, just so they can read the laws in full context, or proposed laws in full context. So what are the key amendments being proposed to our regulated parking laws? As outlined in the report, there are 5 key amendments proposed. Firstly, amendments to our traffic areas are proposed to embed Council's previous decision to propose to, 1, expand the new Bundall Chevron Island traffic area, and secondly, to create 2 new traffic areas, the first being the Gold Coast Light Rail Stage 3 traffic area, and secondly, the Mudgeeraba Showgrounds event-only traffic area. Secondly, we are proposing to update the penalty unit values for certain minor traffic offences within our subordinate local law. As discussed at the recent councillor workshop, 3 penalty unit changes are proposed as outlined in option 2 of the report, of section 5.2 of the report. Each of the proposed are proposed on the basis of better reflecting associated risks and have undergone benchmarking against other SEQ councils, as well as other parking offences currently prescribed the penalty unit within subordinate local law. Proposed changes would result in a decrease from 1.25 to 1 penalty unit for stopping on a verge or parking on a verge or across a driveway, and an increase in penalty units up from 1.25 to 1.5 for stopping on a yellow line. We're also looking to update the register of off-street regulated parking areas. An additional 47 areas are proposed for inclusion in the register listed in Schedule 2 of the subordinate local law, enabling authorised city officers to regulate parking at these locations. We look to expand the use of existing local government employee parking permits, which would allow council-owned vehicles to park in time-regulated or paid parking car spaces for the purposes of a city employee undertaking operational duties. The proposed amendments will eliminate the administrative burden and costs associated with the reimbursement process that currently occurs, as well as remove the need for staff moving operational vehicles mid-task. Additional changes would also allow city lifeguards to park in 2-hour or more time-regulated parking areas for the duration of a patrolling shift, recognising the critical functions of lifeguards and in areas with high demand for parking. And finally, numerous administrative amendments are recommended to improve readability, remove duplication, improve formatting, amend overly prescriptive provisions, and update outdated legislative references with both the local law and subordinate local law. A summary of these improvements can be found in section 5.5 of the report. Thank you.
Questions for officers? Councillor Fowler and Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is just about the local government employee parking permits. So how do we actually plan to regulate these expanded permits to ensure it doesn't result in city staff parking in time-regulated or paid base when it's not for an operational issue? I get all the positives in doing it, but how does the city expect that to regulate that? Or passing those passes to a friend or a family member. So is it that those passes, in your view, would have a number plate recognition, and how are we governing that so we're not having city staff taking up paid parking?
Through the Chair, essentially, yes, we do have the systems in place to be able to manage that situation. There is a V permit system in place where we can manage via, or the city officers will manage via the registration plates of city-owned vehicles. And also there's, as we know, that council fleet or vehicles can, the use of those vehicles can be monitored as well. So I guess on complaint basis.
Just to follow on to that, so what is that system like? So how would it be managed to prevent city staff from occupying those paid spaces on the weekends or in their personal time?
Through the chair, if I can take that question. So, Councillor Fowler, I guess it's not then a case of misuse of the permit, it's a misuse of the vehicle, which is a code of conduct, applicable. I wouldn't call it an offence, but discipline. These parking permits will only apply to city-owned operational vehicles. Each city vehicle has technology, IVMF. I'm not too sure what that stands for, Councillor, but it gives City of Gold Coast Administration Management the ability to run reporting on exactly where that car has been and at what times. So we have got fantastic technology in these vehicles that allows us to ensure that not just the permit but the vehicle itself is not being used for anything other than carrying out operational duties as a local government officer.
Councillor Gates and Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chairman. I just have a question about, and it might not be that you can answer this, but when a property is sold and a purchaser does a search on the residential property, is there any information provided about the restrictions that apply to the eligibility for purchasing an on-street permit? And I'll just give you very quickly, Chairman, the background. I sold a property that had 4 bedrooms, so there were 3 teenagers, and the family also had a boat. They were not eligible to purchase or to apply for an on-street parking permit because there were 4 car parking spaces at the property, and they ended up selling the property because it didn't suit their needs. So I'm just wondering if people are ever, through any of the searches, made aware that they may be restricted in that way.
Might also refer that.
Through you, Chair, Councillor Gates, I can't categorically say yes or no. I'd have to take that question on notice, Councillor. I'm not too sure if that information is available through a property search. That information is certainly available through one quick phone call to the City of Gold Coast, and the team of City Law Approval Officers will speak to the resident and can tell them either way whether they're eligible or not. I'm not aware that it is available through property searches, but I will come back to you on that question.
Well, perhaps it is something we can follow up. It was a most unfortunate incident. Thanks.
Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, about the parking permits, I noticed in the report at page 24, it talks about these being for council-owned vehicles, and I just wanted to make sure that the vehicles that we're providing to community groups on a loan basis for up to 12 months, that they would be excluded from that.
Yes, they would be excluded, yes.
And then my second question is about councillors. There are 15 of us. We have to attend a lot of events and functions and meetings around the city, and our vehicles are privately owned now. So is there the capacity for us to adopt the same provisions for councillors?
Ainsley.
Through the chair, that hasn't been considered as a part of these amendments, Councillor Young. These amendments specifically relate to council-owned vehicles being driven by a local government officer, which doesn't cover councillors.
Councillor Young, my understanding is that the way that our car allowance is written, that it includes car parking, and that we might actually find ourselves in a problem if we had a permit system for us instead.
Yeah, you're right. So the difference for us is we don't submit a claim for car parking, whereas officers would.
Yes.
Okay.
Coming to Councillor Patterson for a question.
Just on that, I would make a note that on a Sunday afternoon when I was on stage with the Mayor doing a presentation at Broadwater Parklands, and I parked in a council car park and I had my councillor parking sign in the window, I received a parking ticket. So it made me thinking I should do something else with my Sunday afternoons. But anyway, just let you know that.
Any other questions for officers, councillors? Councillor Doran, then Tozer.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to query the increase in the bundle traffic area. It seems to be quite away from any generator of people. So, for example, Chevron Island or Hodder. So I'm trying to understand why we're including that section in the timed parking. And then just one second question, please, Chair.
Through the chair, we'll just get Dan McNaught from our Transport and Traffic Area to answer that one.
Through the chair, so Councillor Doran, investigations that we undertook prior to proposing that traffic area identified that there's staff west of the extension area that were parking long term in the residential streets going to work through the day. So parking out those residential streets, which led to complaints. So we've proposed to extend the traffic area into that location to stop that issue from occurring.
So that's as a result of the community in that precinct requesting something be done about parking. Thank you. Just one other question, please, Chair. Just in relation to the infringement values that are proposed to be changed, can officers speak to if there's any difference between a council infringement value and a QPS infringement value for the same offence? Or are they the same?
Yeah, through the chair, essentially the offence amounts prescribed in SPUR, the State Penalties Enforcement Act or regulation, prescribe offences for minor parking offences in Torum. The police use those particular offence amounts. However, the law provides for local government to prescribe our own offence amounts by way of local law, which we have opted to do so, and as have most SEQ local governments opted to do so over many years, if not decades. I guess it's appreciation that local governments do the most of the regulation for minor parking offences.
Can I just follow up on that? So just to be clear, ours are higher than Queensland Police Service for the same offence? Is that the case? For example, parking on a yellow line or verge parking?
For most, the vast majority of offences, our offence amount or penalty unit amounts are higher.
Do you know the difference? We're at 1.5, we're at 0.5 or double or...
Through the chair, using my memory here, I'm pretty sure most are outlined in the SPUR as a 0.4, apart from parking in a car park set aside for persons with disabilities, which is set as a 4 across the board. So, QPS would use the standard 0.4 penalty units. I'm fairly certain. I'll follow up with an email if that's incorrect, Councillor. And across the board, SEQ councils set their own, generally speaking, all higher than what's set out in the SPUR.
Thank you.
I had Councillor Tozer next, and then we'll come back.
Can you just help me understand the time frame for the public notification period for the Mudgeeraba Showgrounds traffic area?
Yep.
Please.
Through the chair, essentially the statutory time frame established by the Local Government Act is 21 days, or minimum 21 days. So we'll give the public that time frame, but essentially we'll be looking at mid-January commencement of that public consultation phase. Prior to that, we will have consulted with the state.
So today the committee will resolve to take action, then council will resolve to take action, and then we'll talk to the state after that, and then in January we'll go to a community consultation about that. Am I reading the tea leaves right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So could I just ask then, because I thought that was what was happening, but the middle of January in our area is a very we've got 10 schools in our area, so a lot of people are away for school holidays. If it's a possibility, we could kind of delay that to the end of January. That would enable more people in that community to be able to participate in that public notification if they wish to. If that's if that's a doable thing, that'd be awesome. Is that doable?
Yes, we can. We'll consult with our community engagement people and make sure that there's no issue with it. But we'll certainly let you know if it is. But I wouldn't see a problem with that.
Great. And if we were to do that public notification period starting towards the end of January, so people could be here, the Mudgerbus show each year is held in June, at the end of June. Does that allow enough time for the next show to be subject to these parking restrictions?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, Councillor?
So if we do the public notification period in January for 21 days into February, and let's say by the end of February is March, April, May, enough time, is that 90 days enough time to give effect to this new parking restriction before the 2025 Mudgerbus show?
Yeah, I guess the June timeframe is an indicative timeframe at this point in time. So we'll be in consultation with our transport planners to make sure that they have enough time to do the implementation activities that we identify before we come back to council. But yeah, typically, and in terms of the last proposed amendments or the last round of amendments that occurred with Local Law 2, that was sufficient time. But,
great. So there's a high likelihood that by the 2025 Mudgerbus show, should the community be supportive through this public notification period, we'll have this traffic area implemented. I just want to give that assurance to my community if that's possible.
Yep.
Through the chair, and forgive my ignorance, Councillor, what month is the Mudgerbus show?
It's normally held in the last weekend in June or second last weekend in June. So, assuming this process can run its course and the implementation can occur, what I'm hoping to do is tell people, hey, by the 2025 Mudgerbus show, if you're supportive, we'll actually have it in place. The alternative is we wait another 12 months, which is not ideal.
That's certainly, we're endeavouring, Councillor Tozer, to be on track. There are some things that may happen along the way. For example, public consultation may see us revising parts of this local law or repeating steps, as Stuart said earlier. But it's certainly our intent to stick to the timeframes that were outlined on page 31 of the report.
Great.
And we're looking for June if everything goes to plan.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Regarding the parking permit scheme expansion and on page 18, first of all, thanks to officers who've been working with the community for quite a while now on this, and we've got that further extension. There's always different views in there, but people understand that it's needed. But as I've expressed to you before, the main thing that the residents want is what Councillor Gates raised, the opportunity to have a parking permit if they need one and to not be penalised because they've created accommodation for cars on their property. So I know we said that was going to be reviewed. Can you just remind me when that happens?
Through the chair, Councillor Patterson. So the review is being driven through Infrastructure Gold Coast with traffic and transport. So I'll hand over to Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. So we're undertaking a full review of our existing permits as part of that review starts 25-26 as part of our stage 5 review into the TAPS program. So, and that's a resolution from 12 months ago.
So 25-26. So when would we expect we go out for community consultation on that?
So the process from here is the team has to undertake that review first, and then we would have to come to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee seeking endorsement on the review undertaken, and then the next process is to start the local law process. So it's some years away still.
Okay. Okay, that's all right, and I think residents understand that that's coming in the future. If you could provide some detail on when, that's just the comfort we need to give, that we recognise that this is an issue, that we are penalising the people who are making the effort to create accommodation for cars off street. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair and Councillor Patterson, when we come back to council when we need to resolve to make. Perhaps we can use that opportunity in the report to put some, further refined timeframes around that review.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, my question is just about the Gold Coast Light Rail Stage 3 precinct and the traffic area there. Sorry, come back. So I understand the need for residential parking through that precinct, and obviously we're going to be having potentially more residential development going through that precinct, so I understand the need. My concern is around the lack of moving it to 3 hours, and we have commuters who we want to be using that public transport who would need a 9-hour car park. Where are we expecting commuters to park?
So, through the chair, ideally we want people using sustainable transport options rather than driving their car to the precinct and parking out the streets. So that's a big reason why we're proposing the traffic area. So typically commuters coming in from the west parking long term in the residential streets leads to complaints to the city, which is why we're proposing the traffic area. We're working with the state government in relation to improving east-west public transport opportunities. So again, we want people trying to use those options if available. Otherwise, we are undertaking some work on other parking opportunities in the future as well. So there's a resolution associated with this item relating to light rail stage 3 and looking at other parking opportunities that we're taking to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee early next year as well to talk more about that issue. So ideally, but we want people using sustainable transport options rather than parking out the residential
Dan, that's
streets.
fine. So is there questions coming back to what's in the report, or are we happy to move on with this one? Councillor Doran?
Thank you, Chair. So just picking up on the Broadbeach to Burleigh section and relating specifically to the outreach to the community in the consultation phase, it does speak to Gold Coast Have Your Say and Gold Coast Bulletin advertising. This particular stretch is quite dense, and I think it would be beneficial to also letterbox the area there. Is that something that's considered? I don't see it listed. I just wanted to understand if that's being considered and an option.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can target letterbox drop those directly impacted residents and businesses. Yeah.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief. Through you, I just wanted to confirm for my community and those who are captured in the Health and Knowledge Precinct area that under the TAPS eligibility criteria review, that'll be something that they'll be able to have their say a part of moving forward as that 25-26 review process. I just wanted to get that confirmation.
Yep. So through the chair, there'll be a local law amendment process we have to go through that has to go through public consultation again.
For all questioned out, seek a mover for the item.
Chairman, I've had my hand up for quite some time.
Sorry, Councillor Young.
Wrong with your eyesight. Yeah. Thank you. I wanted to ask about these off-street regulated parking areas. My concern is in particular about the privately owned car parks, that is shopping centres and the like. So my understanding is 27 of the shopping centre owners have not responded and required or agreed that council can go onto their properties and regulate parking in disability parking bays. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So for those 3 that remain, what actions can the council regulate parking people take?
So the 3 that remain that may involve the city parking operations staff doing some routine assessments or on complaint basis that they might be able to investigate those particular shopping centres and issue infringements for any breaches.
So council officers can go onto the private property and issue an infringement notice for not eligible parking within a disability bay, whereas on the other 27 who are now falling off, what actions will they take as private property owners, or are those disability bays just nonsense?
No, well, that they can self-manage their own disability bays. Those bays need to meet certain Australian standards in terms of how they're designed and the signage requirements. So we've established what those expectations are in our proposed agreements that we've put to each of the shopping centres, and they've indicated by way of either not responding or responding, indicating that they'd prefer to self-manage their particular shopping centres on that basis. Yeah.
And those shopping centres that don't manage their disability bays in accordance with the law are effectively in breach of their development approval, I expect. The approval would carry with it, let's say, a need to designate 24 or 2 disability car parks, and if they're not properly marked, signposted and regulated, then they're in breach of their development approval.
Do you mind if I ask quickly, where is this in the report? I'm interested in it, I just can't find where it is.
Page 23 at the bottom, the last section there called Part 2, OSPRA, designated parking spaces in shopping centres.
There's some good questions in there, but probably not ones that you can answer today.
Yeah,
I'm thinking, could we possibly get that on notice and get a response to all councillors on those questions?
Yeah, certainly. I'd have to take that question on notice.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
So through the Chair, that question specifically is in regards to how do we check that these shopping centres are meeting their requirements under their development approval? Is that correct?
It's related to that, yes.
Yep.
So my understanding is in a development approval, there'll be a requirement to identify and provide a certain number of disability spaces.
Ainsley, I'm happy for you and Councillor Young to discuss this offline and get the question right, and we'll make sure it goes out.
Will do.
Any more questions for officers? In that case, moved by Councillor Gates, second. Councillor Patterson, all those in favour? Against? That's carried. We move to item 6.2. Nah. Councillor Gates didn't want to speak to it. Short presentation before questions.
Through the Chair, thank you, Councillor Tozer. Mr. Chair, Councillors, I'm here today to present to you on a report that we prepared for committee regarding the operational enforcement of verge parking. Just to set some definitions, verge is the term that we've used in our report. It brings together other familiar terms used in legislation such as footpath, such as nature strip and footway. For ease of reference, we'll refer to that as the verge. What is the verge? The verge is quite simply the area of land that exists between the roadway and an adjoining private property or adjacent boundary. The purpose of the report is to provide enforcement advice to yourselves for consideration regarding parking on the verge. In this presentation, we'll take a look at some statistics, look at the risks, advice, some benchmarking, and our obligations as a council, and then we'll present to you the options that we have presented in the report for your consideration. We're also addressing petitions regarding parking on the verge that have been received by residents of Ben Lomond Drive in Highland Park and Merrilane Crescent in Merrimack. Illegal verge parking is the city's #1 reported parking issue. In the 23-24 financial year, we received a total of 18,742 illegal parking complaints. 27% of all these complaints related specifically to illegal parking on the verge. Conversely, during the same period, the city's enforcement staff issue infringement notices. 6% of the total number of infringement notices issued for the same period were for parking on verge offences. Correlate that with the number of warnings that were issued during the same period. 25% of all warning notices issued by city officers were for verge parking offences. In the report, we've considered and presented some of the risks associated with illegal parking on the verge. Primarily, we look at pedestrian safety. Illegal parking on the verge does force pedestrians onto the roadway or to have to move around vehicles on the verge, which does present an increased risk of pedestrian impact with vehicles. Illegal parking on the verge also presents a risk to underground infrastructure. It can cause damage to curb and channel, underground water supply and stormwater outlets, for example. The verge is not designed for the continual operation or driving of vehicles, so we also can see damage to the verge itself. This creates rutting on the surface, and rutting can be hidden by vegetation, and this does lead to, again, an increased risk of pedestrian safety and an increased risk of injury to members of the public. Parking on the verge also creates visibility issues for not only vehicles that are operating on the road, but again, visibility issues for pedestrians that are moving and using the verge for access and egress, and as well essential services. So we have the risk to essential services, so this restricts access for services and repairs by utility providers, and also presents a risk of access for emergency responders. Statutory approach, the Queensland road rules, which we refer to in the report, quite clearly states that parking a vehicle on a verge or half on a verge is a breach of section 197. Clearly states that a driver must not stop on a bicycle path, footpath, shared path, dividing strip or nature strip adjacent to a length of road in a built-up area. And we have referred into the report the provisions under legislation unless a driver stops at a place on a length of road or in an area to which a parking control sign applies.
You happy to take a question now?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Tozer.
So in 1B, where it says, unless the driver is permitted to stop at that place under this regulation, what's an example of that being okay?
Through the Chair, so Councillor Tozer, this is the provisions in legislation for the implementation of parking on verge signage.
So the only example where B would apply is if there was a verge parking permitted sign.
Correct.
There isn't another example. There isn't any other alternative.
No, so again, so the legislation prescribes by way of a parking control sign. So the understanding we have, yes, is that it is by way of that parking control sign, and there are other considerations that go along with that, with reference to the installation of the signage, and assessments would need to be made by transport operations.
Okay. That answers my question. It occurs to me that my question actually sounds like it's been answered as if A was my question. So if there's a verge parking permitted sign, it's captured under A, but I don't know what B would relate to. And that's kind of my question, but you can take it on notice. You don't have to answer.
Through the Chair, the only other example you might have is if it's essential services. So if you're performing an essential duty at that point in time.
Okay. And is there a section in the regulation that deals with emergency services vehicles?
I need to check the exact reference for you, Chair.
Thank you.
In in preparing our report for the committee, we have taken a look we've benchmarked against other local Southeast Queensland local government areas and their approach to parking on the verge. We've benchmarked against Brisbane City, Sunshine Coast, Ipswich and City of Logan. Draw your attention to Brisbane, Sunshine Coast and Ipswich. They have no provisions that permit parking on the verge. The City of Logan has an approach that permits parking on the verge in streets that have a width of less than 6 metres, and there are some conditional exemptions. The City of Gold Coast's current approach also, where certain criteria apply, has a provision that permits 2 up, 2 down. That's two wheels on the verge, 2 wheels on the road for streets that are less than 6 metres wide. Again, as the slide shows, we have quite a number of conditional exemptions for that to apply.
Through the Chair, yes, Councillor, it is in the report.
So when we talk about our obligations as council officers, we do refer to Section 13 of the Local Government Act, which I'll paraphrase, puts a requirement upon us to act with integrity and impartiality to promote the public good and to commit to a system of government and to make sure that we conduct ourselves with accountability and transparency. I would just like to refer particularly to information that is contained on the Queensland Government website. This provides information to the community around the enforcement of road and traffic laws. The City of Gold Coast is not the only enforcement agency that is responsible for enforcement of verge parking and in general the enforcement of road parking regulations. So road and traffic laws are enforced by police officers and certain traffic laws by the Department of Transport. The Queensland Government website quite clearly states that if your vehicle is found parked illegally, both the police and your local government officers will issue an infringement notice for breaches. So in our report, we have presented a number of options for consideration. I will just draw attention to the matrix on the right of your screen. This relates specifically to option 3. Option 3 is the option that we are seeking your endorsement of today. Option 1 considered the introduction of a local law to allow verge parking. This is unsupported. This option is a contravention of both the Local Government Act and the TORM. I'll refer to option 2 and 4 together. So option 2 being the adoption of an unsigned verge parking in streets of less than 6 metres, and then option 4, which is the current approach, which, as I said previously, does have that provision for parking 2 wheels up, 2 wheels down on the verge in streets of less than 6 metres. Both these options are unsupported as they present an adverse risk if parking is permitted contrary to Section 197 of the Queensland Road Rules.
In that case, Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Can we just unpack option 3 a little bit more? I guess what I'm really interested in understanding is in relation to the current law and also the guidelines that city officers do use, what in option 3 is different to what currently happens?
Through the Chair, the key difference with option 3 and option 4 in its current state is the removal of the provision for parking on the verge, 2 wheels, 2 up, 2 wheels up, 2 wheels down in streets that are less than 6 metres. So when we look at option 3, we have categorised high-risk locations, medium risk, and then low-risk locations. The high-risk locations are those locations where, on detection of illegal parking on the verge, it would result in an on-the-spot infringement notice. The difference comes down when we look at particularly the low risk. If we move to the bottom of the enforcement matrix, where currently, if a vehicle is 2 wheels up, 2 wheels down, and meets those conditional exemptions, we wouldn't take an action. We are removing that from the current enforcement matrix. We would propose that instead of having the exemption, we would, as per the conditions that we've set there, if it's not a fully enforceable area, as in one of the high-risk areas, if we have 2 wheels on the verge and there is 1.2 metres of clearance, we would refer that to Transport Operations to consider infrastructure solutions.
Through the chair, just Councillor. Also, I think this particular option that we're recommending has a significantly higher emphasis on education and trying to get voluntary compliance and behaviour change through that particular mechanism increased on what we're currently doing.
Councillor Young.
Yeah. So just to be clear, so everyone's clear, the 6 metres that's referred to the width of the road, that's the constructed pavement. It might be curb to curb, there may not be a curb, it's just the actual width of the bitumen or the...
Through the chair, correct. The measurement is taken from the edge of the road surface to the opposite side of the road, so edge to edge, as you referred.
Thank you. So my understanding is there are some places in the city now where we do allow parking on the verge. Is there a list of those locations, or is there a map? Or
through the chair, no, we don't have a list of those locations. That assessment is made on the spot by our council officers, who would be required, if investigating a complaint in that location, to pull out the tape measure and actually take an on-spot measurement of the road to determine if it meets the 6 metre or less criteria.
Thank you. It says in the report, in accordance with Torum and LL2, there are some locations within the city where permissive parking on verge signs are installed. So that's what I'm getting at.
Through the chair, we might just pass to Renee just to cover that particular question.
Thanks, Chair.
Just through the chair, yes. So there are some locations where we do have P on verge signs. However, these are primarily not in narrow streets. These are where an engineer has done a risk assessment, and based on the through traffic volumes, anticipated pedestrian demands, turnover of traffic, we've deemed it appropriate to permit parking in those areas. So they're usually in, like the back of an industrial area where there's no pedestrians, no cars, and there is a high demand for parking. So they're the situations. And no, we don't have a complete list.
Thank you.
Follow up, Councillor Young, or happy to go to some others for now?
Yeah, I'll let that rest. Thanks.
Questions? Councillor Tozer?
So, first, I want to say thanks to Renee. There's been a few occasions where we've delivered verge parking permitted signs in Division 9 where there's been issues, and off the top of my head, it's places like near the 100 Cafe in Hurston Court down in Bonogan, which is kind of a unique cafe in an isolated area which has an available verge that can be parked on, and a relatively narrow street. And then over at Bidsine Drive, where Pioneer Downs, we've got four-wheel drives with horse trailers that come in. It's a low trafficked area, but a verge parking permitted sign has basically reduced complaints in that area to negligible. So there's some really good examples. As a dad, though, I go to Malawa, touch footy with my kids sometimes, and I park on the verge there, but there's no verge parking permitted signs. Can you help me understand what's happening there? Is that just like we look the other way? Or I've never got a ticket there, which I'm very grateful for, and everyone parks in a very orderly fashion, but there isn't, as I recall, any verge parking permitted there, and yet we're parking on the verge there.
Just through the chair, so that particular location is currently under investigation. We have spoken in the past about Somerset Drive and my opinion there as far as risk to children. So with this particular location, we want to be really sure that this is the right solution from a safety perspective. And so as a result, I've asked for an RPQ to do a formalised risk assessment.
At Malawa?
Sorry?
At Malawa, are you talking about?
Yeah. So we're doing a formal risk assessment and we'll document that. And once the RPQ is signed off on it, we'll look at an outcome there.
Okay, that's my questions for now.
Councillor Dora and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if officers could please inform the community here and us, the councillors, as to what an education warning on first detection will look like as a driver heads back to their car if they've committed an offence under the option 3.
Through the chair, there are a number of options with regard to education that we can take. Starting at the highest level, we can partner through our marketing communications department, and we can provide those high level, and as we suggest in the report, an annualised education program which targets a range of illegal parking issues, of which obviously verge, as we've said, is the number one reported issue. We have a range of other options that we currently utilise. We have various mechanisms through social media campaigns. We have education through our events team, so managing specific events. Council officers within the city parking department also utilise a range of options, which starts with at the vehicle. So these could be warning notices affixed to the vehicle. This can be education collateral affixed directly to the vehicle if we have a scale or size of problem that is larger than just a couple of vehicles. In addition, we use direct mail out as well.
So there's a preventative education mix that you've outlined there, and if somebody is receiving the education first warning, if you like, it'll, from what I'm understanding, is like you to correct me, it'll appear like an infringement on their windscreen, so that they'll have that immediate knowledge that they've committed an offence, and then it'll have a, what are you saying, like a zero value on it, or is that what we're talking about?
Through the chair, that's correct. So we have the ability to issue a warning notice through our current enforcement system, and yes, that places a notice on the vehicle. So that gives that immediate notification to the driver that they have committed an offence or breached legislation. Recent addition to that is the addition of a QR code, which enables the driver then to seamlessly connect to the city's website, where they can access a broader range of information on safe and legal parking.
Thank you. And so that registration number will that be in some sort of system, so that if a driver or a car is found to be in the same spot another time, will another warning be issued, or will we know that the warning's already been issued?
Yes, so those warnings do come by way of an on-screen pop-up to enforcement staff. The approach that we will take is that a warning notice will stay on file in our systems for a period of 12 months. I would like to point out, though, that a warning notice will only be relevant to the offence that is observed at the time by the officer. So if we are looking at illegal parking on the verge and there is a previous warning for a different offence, we will not apply that warning.
Councillor, sorry, were you done, Councillor Doran? Yeah, good line of questions. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I just want to get absolute clarity. I'm just looking at this 1.2 clearance in relation to roads less than 6 metres wide. So I just want to establish that with regards to this option and the consideration being put forward, if two wheels were up on the verge, say if the verge was 2 metres wide, then a vehicle it more or less could park up to 80 centimetres up onto that verge with its two wheels parked, which would give the 1.2 metre clearance, and that would be permissible under this option. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is the current approach. We are not endorsing that approach. Option 3, which we are seeking your endorsement on, removes the provision for parking two wheels up in narrow roads. Where we've got that clearance, option 3 proposes to refer to transport operations for assessment of P on verge parking.
Right.
Through the chair, just a clarification on that as well. What we can do in that instance is issue education material. So we can provide education to the driver at that point in time, as well as referring it to transport and traffic. So it's not a one or the other. It can be a combination of all.
Follow up. Thanks, Chair. So just again to clarify then, we are basically looking to remove that provision of 2 wheels if we were to adopt option 3 today.
Through the chair, that is correct. We are removing that provision.
Councillor Gates.
Through you, Chair, can you tell me when the provision for an exemption for narrow streets was applied? Because this came about through a general business item, through numerous complaints in Northern Gold Coast about narrow streets, and at no time have I been aware, as a representative for a very long time, that there were a list of exemptions that provided for the ability for people in roads less than 6 metres to park in Gold Coast streets. We were aware of it in Logan, which was the information behind the presentation of a general business item in terms of, if Logan can do it, why can't we? So I'm quite astounded today to see that we've always had that list of exemptions available to the officers before they issue an infringement notice. How long have we been able to do that?
Through the chair, under the old structure, the respective directors of the Transport and Traffic and the Lifestyle and Community directorates came together and endorsed an internal procedure which managed verge parking. As part of that endorsement that they provided, the current approach was adopted, so 2022.
2022, but there wasn't a report to council that change had been made.
Through the chair, councillor, I'm not aware of a report being produced at that particular time, no.
Okay, so what this general business item and this report is doing is actually making the situation worse if we follow the recommendation that's put before us today. I appreciate the educational focus on what's being presented to us, and I would still like that to happen, but I would be more interested in moving option 4, Chairman, that the current situation remains with additional education.
So possibly there are some other things proposed as part of option 3. Is it maybe a hybrid where the retention of that very specific part that you're looking to seek might be added to option 3?
And perhaps we can ask the officers to have another look before full council.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I'm tending to lead that way because I have to admit to being in the same position as Councillor Gates that the internal policy that's been referenced today, that's the first I've heard of it. And I think that's not brilliant that it's got to this stage of it being coming back to committee for a second hit before we've become aware of that. So if committee is happy, unless there's more questions for now, I'm more leaning towards the option of deferring this to full council and allowing the EGM and general manager to provide additional advice before full council. What's the committee's feelings around that? Defer to full council or defer to a future round is the option, I guess.
I would be happy to move a motion that a revised recommendation be prepared in advance of full council, with the officers making a recommendation that includes the parts that you think are important in option 3 as part of option 4, which still allows for conditional exemptions.
I'm happy to second that.
So Councillor Young, you have some input?
Doesn't item number 1 say that it's going to be option 3, but they still have permissive verge parking signs in narrow streets where possible? So it's still open to maintaining those elements of the current. Am I wrong?
Option 1 has illegalities in it that it's in contravention of Torum, so we can't have option 1.
Through the chair, Councillor Young, just to address that particular point, option 3 does include the ability to conduct assessments and, where appropriate in very exceptional circumstances, look at potentially installing signage to enable parking on the verge, but would certainly be the exception, not the rule. Just really conscious that to do that across the city would probably not be viable.
So if I can, Chair, theoretically then we could request consideration of particular streets that we know are less than 6 metres wide, and then these other investigations would follow suit, and then there'd be an outcome. Yes, this street it's possible to park 2 wheels up, and this street's not.
Yeah, just through the chair, in the situation of narrow streets, if accessibility is legitimately a problem, I don't feel that parking on verge side is the solution, because you're not going to guarantee what width is left. So if accessibility is actually an issue, we would initially look at pockets of yellow no stopping lines. We usually locate them across driveways to allow for that weaving effect. If it is a very narrow street, we would look at maybe doing a yellow line down one side. And there's other infrastructure solutions that we would look at, like indented parking and formalising angle parking within the street.
So, Councillor Gates has proposed a motion, and Councillor Patterson was happy to second that. We've got a little bit of time before full council, so if that can be prepared with enough notice to get it out to councillors to provide input back, so that hopefully it's clean sailing at full council. Is there any committee members want to make an input on that now? We're happy with that approach.
Yep.
Councillor Doran, question?
Thank you, Chair. So just wanted to clarify that you and Councillor Gates are happy to proceed with the motion you're putting forward, given that the recommendation point number 1 does say, as Councillor Young indicated, consider permissive verge parking signs in narrow streets where possible. So as I'm listening to the conversation, that does already provide the options that Councillor Gates is seeking clarification before full council.
Can I respond in that I know the area fairly well, but I don't know every street that's under 6 metres. So I have a concern that at the moment streets under 6 metres can have a little bit of flexibility, and the motion before us without a sign does not allow the same consideration. So, look, I'm happy to defer the whole thing to full council if you think that that's the better way to go, Chairman, and just have the officers have a rethink about the importance of the features they've put forward today, but to still allow, in those situations, the discretion that has been available for the last 2 years that we were unaware of. That's right, and we don't.
So, Councillor Gates, I think it would be best if we just deferred the whole item and allow officers to provide.
So I'll have to move a procedural motion that item not proceed, but rather that it's deferred to full council.
Yeah. We'll defer the whole thing, allow Alicia and the team time to come back with an updated option 3 that includes the feedback from today and perhaps clarifies Councillor Doran and Councillor Young's point about option 1, because it very clearly calls out some legality issues. So let's have that explored further and explained further.
I think because it was seconded, the council has to decide that it not proceed, Mr. Chairman. So that was why I suggested I would. They've just removed the motion, but I think the council has to decide, because the council owns, or the committee owns, the recommendation because it was seconded.
Possibly. Yeah, I mean, I pointed out that Councillor Patterson was happy the second, but I don't know if I'd made it a live motion yet.
All right, whatever.
That'll do. Okay, so our intent is to defer the entire item and resolution. So there's no resolution of committee, it's just deferral of the item to full council. The EGM and General Manager will provide an update to all councillors well in advance of full council with clarification of the points raised today, in the hope that we can get a resolution at full council. Is there Any concerns with that approach?
I suppose I know that Division 9 has been, but I've gone on a lot about this over the last 12 months, and I know that other councillors have as well. I just know you put a lot of work into it, Andrew. You did a really good job. Rebecca as well. You guys worked really hard on this, and I know that at times you're in my office talking about verge parking in acreage areas, and we were on different sides of the fence at that point, and I just know that it was hard work to get to this point. So I'm nominally supportive of option 3, notwithstanding the committee's current stuff, and I just wanted to know you to know very publicly that we've been at odds. I appreciate your work. This was a comprehensive report, and looking forward to seeing some resolution moving forward so we can move on to other things.
I very much agree with the last part of that we can hopefully get this resolved at full council and let resources be dedicated to other issues. Yes, Councillor Gates.
Just before you move on, Chairman, I think there was support for a revised recommendation focusing on item 4. Option 4, but do the officers understand that that was the reason for the deferral, so that a new recommendation based around item 4 can be prepared, but including other aspects that they feel important from the recommendation we had today?
I think that's understood, Luke.
Through the Chair, absolutely. There is potentially an option in terms of that education approach we can absolutely implement regardless of that resolution as well.
So I would expect that we would get back a recommendation with a hybrid that's possibly mainly option 4, maybe a little bit of option 3.
Thank you.
And will provide detail of what the problem is with the option 1 that officers have got a major concern with, and we'll end up with a hybrid resolution back. Question, Councillor Doran?
Chair, just in relation to Councillor Gates' comment around general acceptance on option 4, that doesn't reflect my views, and if we're going to defer it to full council, it would be my preference if officers considered all of the options when they came back rather than just create a hybrid, because my preference would be option 3.
And just closing out, if I may, we would not want to support anything that's not entirely legal. So if there has been an error in the officer's undertaking to have discretion shown, I stand to be corrected, and I would never want to support anything that's not entirely legal in terms of the Act and Torum. Thank you.
So, Councillor Dora, just to your point quickly, what I made about option 4, I suspect it will actually probably have more of the content of option 3, but with some clarity of the parts from option 4 added into it. It's probably more of a hybrid back that way to that part. But we will make sure that's out well in advance to give all councillors plenty of input time before full council. Cool. So we have a live motion. Councillor Gates moved, Councillor Patton second to defer the item to full council. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Love it when an internal policy throws us off course at the last minute. Brilliant. Officers, thank you very much for your time. We will move on to item 6.4. So, Councillor Martin, I know you have an interest in this item. Do you need the presentation on it? Do you have some questions, or you just wish to speak to it?
No, I just have a couple of questions.
Yep. So we might go straight to questions on this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I do want to acknowledge Matt and the team's work on this SEPTED audit, and I support the findings, and I know that that's already led to our closed-circuit safety camera network being deployed for the area. Really, this petition started with a spate of ongoing unlawful camping, which we know is linked to homeless, but particularly there's a couple of individuals there that were really disruptive to the community. At the time of preparing this report, obviously those individuals moved, but since are back. So I have a question. I know the feedback from QPS was that there's been no sort of community concern
or issues there, which I was surprised with, because I must admit I currently get a couple of calls or contacts per day about some of the individuals that are camping / homeless in the area, about behaviour, antisocial behaviour. So just wondering, Matt, if you could elaborate on that correspondence with the police.
Yeah, through the chair. So the feedback we got from QPS in the area was that they're not receiving any complaints themselves, or complaints that we're aware of. There may be some confidential complaints that they're aware of at the moment, but we as city officers don't understand that or aren't aware of those. So we engage collaboratively with QPS in this space all the time. We're completing regular patrols through Woonga Avenue and Kevin Gates Park. We had some success in moving both illegal campers on. One's returned to the area, and we're currently working with them, our public space officers from a homelessness perspective, and QPS as well, and we will continue to enforce the local law in that area. So sorry, I find that really hard to take on board, given I know that police have visited the site and the individuals repeatedly. Disturbances at night. Obviously, I don't get the 000 calls, but I know that they've been on site, and in fact, we've had working visits there as a work group. But perhaps then it leads me to the query of how do we deal with, and I absolutely understand how we invest in homelessness and camping around our PSLOs. They do a fantastic job around getting them the pathway out of getting them into housing, not shifting the problem one street back. But if someone doesn't want to go, doesn't want to take up services, how can the city deal with that for the community's expectations? Through the chair, so we work closely with our public space officers in Service Gold Coast. I would have to defer to them to the specific questions regarding homelessness and the city's involvement, and obviously state government leading response to homelessness. From a local law perspective, we are currently working with the PSO team there and our legal team on when a person who is experiencing homelessness doesn't accept services, what's our regulatory approach? So we're working through that. We have to consider the Human Rights Act and ensure that a person's human rights, in this instance, who doesn't have a home, are understood. And then we work on compliance action. So we take a initial voluntary compliance approach. So we'll work with the individual, educate them on the local law, and we have had success in this particular space. We have moved on several illegal campers, and then we'll progress through the compliance process like any other.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I do think it may have been helpful to have the PSO team here, because it is pretty much an issue for them as well. On page 316, referring to Councillor Martin's point, we say that many of these services are voluntary, that we're engaging people with, but people cannot be compelled to engage with them. Then the next paragraph is the city has an obligation under relevant human rights legislation, which was brought in just under the last Labor government, and which I will note is enabling things like someone who recently defecated and was taken to court. The police were not able to, publicly defecated, and police were not able to take action because the lawyer successfully argued that that was against their human rights. So I know you're up against it with this bizarre legislation. My concern is, and this is where the question is with the PSOs, we have noted, so since the restructure in council, we saw 3 levels of capability on PSOs leave. I've been working in this area for a long time. We saw before a way of managing these things. I have the same issue that Councillor Martin had, where we had an issue in James Overall Park which took 7 months because someone didn't want to move. Significant impacts on the public. So my question is, why is it taking longer now than it used to when we are under the same legislation? Why are we not ensuring that there are actions which protect the community and the public if people are just flat right refusing and saying, no, this is my home now for the next 10 years?
Through the chair, I might have to take that one on notice, Councillor. I'm not fully across the history and what happened a few years ago that may have had a more prompt time frame. All I can say is we are actively working with the PSO team and our legal team at the moment to understand from a local law perspective what can we do to balance the Human Rights Act and our local law in these scenarios. We are seeing these issues pop up more and more across the city at the moment, so we know it's a challenge we're facing.
Can I just do a follow-up question?
You can, but
It'll be a short question. I don't know how long the answer will be. So when we do get that response or notice, I'll be really curious as to why we can move people on within days on the Broadwater Parklands or on our Surfers Paradise beaches, but we can't in one of these parks. I don't understand why that ruling is different. Thank you.
interesting definition of a question, but I'll take it. Councillor Gates.
Thank you. I just wanted to make it clear that my experience has been that if it's illegal camping, we can move them on. But if someone is homeless, it's a very different situation from an illegal camper. And that's why it takes so long to try and connect them with the necessary services, but to have some empathy for the fact that they are homeless.
So I think we're probably going down a line of what's a different report to a different committee about the PSO local law state arrangements. This is very much about a petition response to this issue in Councillor Martin's area. Councillor Martin, did you have any further questions on the petition response itself?
Yeah, just one very quick one. Just noting, obviously, police's response in that, they're saying basically they haven't got many calls here. I disagree with that, so I'd like to seek that we, I'd like to see that we request support of police and absolutely understand where Councillor Gates is talking about homelessness. What with this petition response has got to do with is when there are individuals that no longer accept services and are disruptive and antisocial in the community. So in that instance, I think rather than continue to partner with Queensland Police, I think that we also need to formally request assistance when the circumstances warrant. So I wonder, through you, Chair, whether you would support an addition of, in the recommendation, requesting Queensland Police assistance once the city has exhausted all other avenues.
Councillor Young's got a question first, and I'm happy to come back for your change recommendation.
Thanks, Chair. And it relates to this matter of the police. I have wondered when we may be able to activate the police, whether it's in this situation or in other parks. And like other councillors, I've got stories of people genuinely trying to use parks and not able to do that because of the presence of illegal campers or homeless folk. For example, a woman had a rotunda booked for her wedding and couldn't do it there because someone had claimed it and told her to go away in no uncertain terms. So I just wonder where the police action takes effect if our people can't pursue an enforcement.
Through the chair, we actively engage with QPS daily, weekly, both from a PSO perspective, public space perspective, and a local laws and a regulation perspective. We often refer cases to them, and we actively partner with them through our quarterly partnering meeting. So it's something we can continue to work on with the QPS and continue to deliver a safe city.
Councillor Martin, you have a proposed change recommendation.
Yeah, but I was seeking through you, Chair, whether that change from an officer perspective would give suitable, allow you to run its course, but when it warrants, formally request the assistance of the police to assist.
Mr Chair, I'm probably going to say the same thing as Luke. I think we do that, Councillor Martin. So not only our team, but the PSO team in Service Gold Coast. So that is something that happens, and that's why you will see the police there. But happy to formalise it. But it is probably something we need to liaise with Service Gold Coast team because fundamentally that's their core responsibility, not our team.
Excuse me, Chair.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, I know in Division 14 that council officers in this space meet with local police on a weekly basis to discuss all the issues around homelessness or sleeping rough or antisocial behaviour. And I think there is a lot of collaboration in setting it. It does take a long time though, and I've had the situation of someone being in a street and antisocial behaviour for months. So it does take a long time. But I think they are meeting weekly, I'm sure, in other divisions as well, because they do meet weekly in Division 14, which is helpful.
So, Councillor Martin, do you have some words, or are you happy to follow this up offline with Luke and Matt about how maybe we could try and get that approach that Councillor Neal just touched on this specific issue in your area?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, based on the response that we can activate that, I'm happy to take that offline, given it's a specific issue in the area.
Cool.
So happy to support.
So in that case, we'll revert back to the original recommendation. Councillor Martin, did you wish to move that at all?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
So Councillor Martin is happy to move the officer recommendation. Seconder, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Martin, did you have anything else you wish to add?
Just, I'll be in touch about following up that particular area. Thank you for the recommended changes.
Anyone wish to speak against? In that case, I will close debate. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimous. Councillors, it is 10:30. We will take a 10-minute break and recommence at 10:40. Live streaming off. Thank you.